Go ahead and turn your Bibles to Job, and we're going to be starting in chapter number 1. Oh, fun. It's going to be, All right, we'll see where the sound goes. I'm just going to keep preaching either way. But we're going to be talking about Job today. And we'll get to why in just a second, but we're going to be looking at the suffering of Job and how God is sovereign over all things, both the good and the bad. You know, God is always in control. And sometimes it's kind of hard to reconcile when we look about our life and wonder, well, what in the world is God doing, especially in times of suffering? So we're going to be examining the book of Job today. But before we do, again, we have our memory verse. Now, faith is a substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. But without faith it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Now, with this passage on faith, I want you to kind of consider for a moment, it is really hard to have faith when everything is going absolutely perfectly, isn't it? Faith is often revealed and strengthened not in times of ease and times of comfort when we're laying in our bed and everything is absolutely fantastic, but it's in times of great difficulty that really our faith is strengthened, where it's worked, where we grow in that faith. And God is pleased by our faith. And so this is going to tie into what we're looking at today, but go ahead and look in Job chapter 1 and in verse number 1. The Bible says this, "There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright and one that feared God and eschewed evil. And there was born unto him 7 sons and 3 daughters." Now, Genesis 10, if you guys remember when we went back, okay, Genesis 10 tells us that the grandson of Shem through Aram, his name was Uz. And he probably lived south of the Dead Sea, so Job is a Semite. Okay, now the book of Job was probably written by Job himself, and I don't think this is him bragging. The Holy Spirit once again guided these men to write the book. But this is probably the oldest book in your Old Testament. Hey, what I mean by that is Moses came along later. Hey, now, when we're going through this, you're probably wondering, well, why are we going through Job? We haven't even finished Genesis yet. Hey, we're not even through Genesis chapter 12, and all of a sudden we're skipping over to Job. Well, remember, we're going chronologically. Okay, we're not going according to the books of the Bible, and so the book of Job is a book of wisdom. Hey, it's right next to Psalms, it's right by the books of poetry, and honestly, Job is one of my favorite books in the Bible, which, you know, I like to say about every book in the Bible, but it really is absolutely incredible. As we go through the book of Job, honestly, about 38 chapters of it is really a kind of a theological and philosophical debate over, you know, the existence of suffering. Hey, which, you know, life kind of has a lot of, if you haven't noticed. Hey, now, we're blessed. We're very richly blessed, but we all have problems. We all have trials. We all have difficulties. And either you're coming out of one, you're in one, or you're going into one. That's just the reality of it. And so we ask these questions of God, and we have these debates, and so you see Job and his friends, and they're having this discussion over the very existence and nature of suffering, and by virtue of that, the very nature of God himself. Because it's amazing how spiritual people get in the midst of suffering. You know, when something is going wrong, people get uniquely spiritual. They start looking toward God. And so we're going to be discussing, you know, the very character of God himself. Now, the book of Job was probably written about 2100 BC and would have made him contemporary, more than likely, okay, with Abraham. And so these guys are probably, you know, going around the face of the earth at the same time. And we see Job, I mean, he was a great guy. Now, when the Bible says he was perfect, it doesn't mean that, you know, he never did anything wrong. But man, he was consistent. He had an incredibly godly character. You know that word eschewed. Now, we don't use it a lot, but it means he's actively avoiding evil. Hey, I mean, he knows where evil is, and he says, I am not going to go there. Verses 3 and 4 tells us about how he was blessed. His substance also was 7,000 sheep and 3,000 camels and 500 yoke of oxen and 500 she-asses and a very great household, so that this man was the greatest of all the men of the east. And again, if he was a contemporary of Abraham, that's pretty good. He was pretty well off. And his sons went and feasted in their houses, every one his day, and sent and called for their 3 sisters to eat and to drink with them. So let's start with the good. He was blessed. He was very, very richly blessed. He had a lot of stuff. You know, and his stuff was kind of overwhelming. I mean, that's a lot of camels. I'm not sure what a person would do with that many camels, but apparently, I mean, they were put to work. I mean, 500 yoke of oxen. Hey, now, we don't know how much land the man had, but I mean, if they were plowing, and, you know, 2 head of, I mean, 500 yoke of oxen, that's 1,000 ox. Hey, I mean, that's, teams of oxen out there working. These weren't just, he had a giant field of oxen and, hey, guys, look at my field of oxen. No, these guys were busy plowing. So, I mean, this guy had a lot of land. He had huge numbers of crops, and he had, the ability to, these camels were for transporting his goods as he's, selling and making business. And so I think, this guy was organized. I mean, to have this kind of stuff taking place, I mean, you have to have a lot of land, you have to have a lot of organization, you have to have a lot of connections. I mean, Job was well known. He wasn't off in some little corner all by himself, and he was connected. He would have been a major name. People would have done business with Job, and again, Job was a good guy. He was the kind of guy you wanted to do business with, that he was going to hold up his end of the bargain. And so he was consistent, he was faithful, but he was also a family man. It wasn't that he just threw himself into the work and that's the only thing he cared about was making himself great. No, we see that, his kids, that was a tight-knit group of kids. I was thinking, if these guys are going and they're feasting every day, his kids were well off. Okay, and we don't know. I don't think they were mooching off of their father. I think that they learned how to work hard from dad. But notice this, they were close-knit. Every day they were going and feasting one with another. And so every day, I mean, this shows me this is a tight-knit, this is a strong relationship family. And so to me, I think the Bible is pointing out Job had a really good work-life balance, where it wasn't like he was over in one area versus another. The guy knew how to prepare his field, the guy knew how to work, and the guy knew how to have a family and to raise them and to train them. And so Job really, I mean, it's hard to find any kind of flaw with his character. I mean, just going through, there's nothing that's really kind of sticking out. And it was so, when the days of their feasting was gone about, that Job sent and sanctified them, and rose up early in the morning, and offered burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, "It may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." Thus did Job continually. Not only did Job take care of his stuff, not only did Job take care of his family, but he really cared about his relationship and his standing with God. This is something that was a priority in his life. And when the days of their feasting were gone about, okay, that once again, we look at that and we say, okay, well, when were the days of their feasting? 7 sons, and each day they had the feast in their own house. Which means 7 days a week, Job got up early, he went and he sanctified, he took one of those 7,000 sheep and he offered it as a sacrifice, and he said, look, I don't know if my kids are doing anything wrong, but such was his love and his care and his devotion, both towards God and towards his family, that he was willing to give up of his substance daily. The man was devoted. He was devoted to God, he was devoted to his family. I mean, this is, talk about Father's Day. This guy was a good dad. He was a really good father. He was careful. He was cautious. He dotted all his I's. He crossed all of his T's. And sometimes you're going to do the very best that you can. Job was doing everything right. Okay, there's no flaw in his plan. There's nothing wrong with the programming. He had saved up, if I can put it that way. Hey, he had invested in his family. He had spent the time. He had spent it wisely. He was right in his relationship with God. He was not wandering away. And yet, even though he had done everything perfectly, still trials came. Still, the trouble came. And sometimes in your life, trials are going to come. And one of the very first things you're going to do is, and we ought to reflect and say, have I done anything wrong? And we ought to. But sometimes the trials come, and it doesn't have anything to do with what you did. They just come. It's just the reality. It's not some kind of divine punishment. It's not some kind of, I did something wrong, and so now I have to, have the harvest from what I have sown in my life. Sometimes you've sown good seed. As far as we can tell, Job had done everything he was supposed to do, and yet he still suffered. And something that needs to be understood, this place is not heaven that we're in. It's a sin-cursed world. Things go wrong. They just break. And it doesn't matter how carefully you maintain your house, it's going to have problems. Okay, the shingles are going to need to be replaced. The gutters are going to have to go. You're going to have to get a new water heater. You're going to have to get a new heater. That just happens. But what did I do wrong? It's the wrong question. It's just the wrong question. And you're going to drive yourself nuts asking that question, because you can do everything right, and we still live in a sin-cursed, in a sin-broken world. You're going to have problems. You're going to have issues. Oftentimes I think we tell ourselves this lie: if I can just fix this, then everything will be perfect. No, it won't. No, it won't. It will never be perfect in this world. Something's going to happen. And I don't tell you that so that you're afraid and wondering, well, what's coming down next, the pipeline? Okay, no, the reality is that, hey, we're in the pipeline, okay? We're going through the pipeline. We're going through the pipeline. And so there's not what's coming down the pipeline. It's we're in the pipe, okay? We know where our destination is, but until then, go with the flow, okay? And the flow's rough. There's going to be some twists. There's going to be some turns, and you're going to be tumbled about a little bit, but know where you're going, okay? Now, continuing on with Job. Now, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down in it. Now, just to be clear, I don't think that Satan can go directly into the very throne room of God, because there can be no sin in his presence, and Satan's a little sinful, and so I don't think he can go there. But I think outside of the gates of heaven, okay, God holds an audience, and he's, okay, what's going on and what's happening, and God cares about them. Now, God is omniscient. He knows, and so he's not sitting there wondering, I wonder what's taking place back on earth. He knows, but he gives them jobs, and he expects a report back. And so they're reporting, and Satan, he comes among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? Now, where have you been? What have you been up to, Satan? And notice Satan's reply, just going to and fro on the earth, walking up and down in it. And you can almost taste the spite. I mean, really, you can taste it. And there's a couple different, if I can say, good reasons for Satan to be upset. Not too long before, the Tower of Babel was dispersed. And so, Satan didn't have to walk so far before. But now he's got to get his steps in, as he's going to and fro, because they've been dispersed. So he's a little frustrated, which, that's just really too bad. But he's been restless ever since he's been cast out of heaven. And we know what he's doing. He's, seeking whom he may devour. And so he's going and he's testing these men, and he's going and finding. And so God asked him this question. The Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, Doth Job fear God for naught? Now, I want you to notice something. God is the one who brings up Job. That's incredible. What a testimony, where Satan's going through and, he's examining the hearts of men, seeking whom he can devour, and God says, hey, what do you think about Job there? How about that guy? What a testimony. I mean, just in that statement that God would bring him up, hey, that God knows him, he sees him, and I want you to remember this, God knows Job. As we're going to be looking at the trial, God sees Job. He knows exactly what's taking place in the life of Job. And he asked Satan, have you considered my servant? Have you thought about him? How much did that irk the devil? How much did that instantly bother him? You could tell immediately Job was a thorn in the devil's side. Didn't like Job. Counted Job as an enemy. Satan hates mankind. He longs to see the destruction of mankind. And so to see a man like Job, who was following after God, who was doing those things of God, and God is blessing him richly, it frustrated him. And so he brings up this challenge. He says, well, doth Job fear God for naught? Why should he be afraid of you? Look at his life. Everything is absolute nothing but blessings. Like, yeah, why wouldn't he? He's the richest man in all the East. He's been blessed in every way, shape, and form. Why wouldn't God fear you? Or why wouldn't Job fear you, God? I mean, there's no reason for him not to. If you gave him a reason not to fear you, if you gave him a reason, to not be happy with you, then he would quit immediately. Verses 10 through 11, Hast thou not made a hedge about him and about his house and about all that he hath on every side? That's pretty intimate knowledge that the devil has, by the way, isn't it? Like, oh, you made a hedge about him. How far does that hedge go? It's about his house, too. Can't get in there either. And not only is it there, and about all that he hath on every side. And so, the devil has been testing Job himself, can't get in there, there's a hedge. The devil goes to his household, can't get in there, there's a hedge about that as well. Okay, well, I'll go after his stuff, and God put a hedge there. And so the devil is actively seeking to destroy Job. He has been testing the boundaries, he's been testing the fence, and there's no break. It's surrounding, it's protected, and the devil himself cannot get in there. Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. And so here's the devil, testing the defenses, looking on the inside, and he is frustrated because, man, Job is just growing. Job is just doing well. And he is sitting there, and he is watching. He is seeing these things grow. He is taking an account of God's blessings on Job, and he wants to destroy it, but he just can't. And so he goes to God and he says, "But put forth thine hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face." The devil says, "All those blessings, all that stuff, yeah, I know I can't get in there. Thank you, God, for that, by the way. But if you were to put out your hand and you just touch him, you just barely provoke him a little bit, God, and he's going to curse you to your face. You're going to see the strength of that relationship. Take away the blessings and see what happens." I wonder, if our blessings were taken away, how quickly would we fold? How quickly would we curse God? When the hardship starts coming, when the trials start coming, how quick do we turn on God? Because we see the blessings and everything is wonderful and it's good, and God has blessed us in a mighty way, and we enjoy those daily, richly. But if those get taken away, how quickly do we turn on God and curse him and say, "What are you doing, God? How could you allow this to happen in my life?" How quickly do we turn on our Father when things aren't going swimmingly? Do we turn our back on God? Because really that's the challenge that the devil lays forth. That's the original challenge when it comes to one of his children is, if you take away the blessings, they'll turn on you. How often have I played into the devil's hand, I wonder? Where the test comes and my blessings are taken away, and the first thing I do is I get upset at God. That's the devil's challenge. Let's see how Job reacts. "And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, all that he hath is in thy power, and only upon himself put not forth thine hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord." Okay, just touch his stuff. All that he hath, and Job will quit. So God allowed Satan to destroy his stuff. God said, "Okay, go ahead. Hey, see what happens." Now I want you to notice something here. God allowed it to happen because he already knew what was inside Job. What an incredible integrity and strength of character. What a man Job is, that God would allow these trials to come into his life. But really, here's the question. Why did God do it? Why did God do it? It's not like he has anything to prove to Satan, like, "I'll show you, Satan." Hey, that's not who God is. He's God. This is not like some kind of evil battle where God just has to get one over on the devil finally. Are you kidding me? He's a defeated foe. God knew from the very beginning he's a defeated foe. There's no struggle here. And so why did God allow this to happen? And oftentimes we have that exact same question. Why did God allow this to happen in my life? When I'm going through this struggle, when I'm going through this trial, when I'm going through this heartache, I ask, why? And we're going to talk about that question, but I'm going to give you some answers first, and then we're going to explain them, but I want to give you the answers. I want you to consider these things. First, because God gets glory. We were created for his glory. And Job gave God glory over and over and over again through that trial, and sometimes in our trials, we give God glory. And that's what we're created for, and he deserves it. We're created for his glory, so we should do what we're created to do. In this lifetime, which is very short, we ought to give God glory, and that includes giving God glory in the trials. Satan himself says, what kind of glory is it to you that he, worships you and he does those things when he's blessed? But when you do it when it's hard, that shows God some glory. The second reason is this, to prove the integrity of Job. And I'm going to use that word a lot. I preached on it a while ago, but I just love the integrity of Job. It shows what he was really made out of. I preached on this before, but even that word torment in the Bible, it speaks of a testing, to see the quality of something, to see what's really on the inside, because we have this surface level. We have this kind of surface that we like to present, but how quick do we get angry? How quick do we get depressed? How quick is that veneer stripped off, and then what are we really made of? Okay, how deep do our convictions actually go? Because it's easy to have convictions when everything is perfect. But when it gets hard, how quickly do we quit? So it shows what we're made of. The third thing it does is it sets a precedent for those who follow. So that others, when they're going through trials, once again in a sin-cursed and a sin-broken world, that they can look back on someone else who's gone through something similar and they might have hope. A wellspring in the valley, if I can put it that way. Hey, something where someone can look at, it's an example where we can have hope, where we can be encouraged, knowing, if God did that for Job, in the midst of that kind of turmoil, what can he do for me? And I really believe that Job has comforted literally millions of people through his trial. Millions. How much suffering has been alleviated? How much hope has been given because of what Job went through? And so we find those three different reasons for it, but I want you to notice this too. God put a limit on the suffering. He put bounds. He said, don't touch Job. You can put your hand on everything else, don't touch him. And there was a hard limit where, no, you can't cross this line. And God always draws a line. He will not suffer us to be tempted above that ye are able. And so I find it incredible, Job was able to handle a lot. You know, maybe you're suffering through today. Hey, maybe you've gone through some suffering that I've never gone through. Hey, maybe you're able to take more than I can. Hey, maybe, I don't know. But God draws a line. He says this, no more than this. And so if God has allowed it, he's drawn the line. If I can say this, give God the glory. That's what he's trying to do with it. Use it as an example to others. That's what he's trying to do with it. Hey, and also prove the integrity. Show what you're really made of. Job chapter 1, verse number 13. And there was a day when his sons and his daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And so we go into the actual trial of Job. There was a day. The sun was shining. The sky was blue. It was probably a great day. They're going to another one of their banquets. It's one, 7 days a week. It's just like any other day. There was no evil portend. There wasn't, an evil wind blowing in. The clouds weren't looming. He didn't wake up that day thinking, oh no, something's wrong. I feel a disturbance in the air. No, it was just a normal day. But the day came. Everything was going swimmingly, but they went haywire so very fast. Now, I once again, my intention with this is not to discourage, it's not to scare, but I want you to understand sometimes everything's going to be going great until very, very suddenly it's not. The piece of news comes in, and we start seeing that with Job. And there came a messenger unto Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the asses feeding beside them. And the Sabeans fell upon them and took them away. Yea, they have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. Now, I want you to notice a couple things here. Now, all of that was taken away, but I want you to notice they were doing what they were supposed to do. The oxen were out plowing. They were doing what they weren't, lazing about. They weren't, doing nothing. He was using them as they were supposed to be used. But he wasn't even overdriving them. He wasn't some kind of, slave task driver, okay, because we see, the asses were feeding beside them. We see some were resting, in order to be able to go to work, and we see others that were working. They were doing what they were ought to do. What they were supposed to do. They were diligent. They were careful. They were making sure everything was as it ought to be, and yet it didn't matter. They were taken away. They were gone. We don't know of anything that Job did to provoke the Sabeans. No idea. We don't see anything where, Job said an unkind word, or, Job had some business deal go awry, or, his neighbors were the Sabeans, and so they were really jealous of him, and he was flaunting it. We don't see anything like that. They just came. No provoking. They were doing what they were supposed to do, and yet he suffered the loss of all. Now, this should encourage you, hey, but evil men do evil things. They just do it. And it's not because you did something wrong. It's not because you provoked them. It's not because you went after them. Okay, you were doing what you were supposed to do, and yet evil happens. Men have a free will. And sometimes men, with their free will choose to do evil to you because they're sinners, just like we are. We sin. We trespass against each other. And sometimes we're going to be, if I can put it this way, the victims of another man's sin, where we didn't do anything wrong. It's just, I guess I don't have any other way to put it. That's just the way it goes. Just evil happens to us. And so the Sabeans came, and he took away all that he had. And then we go to verse number 16. And while he was yet speaking, there came also another and said, the fire of God is fallen from heaven, and hath burned up the sheep and the servants, and consumed them. And I only am escaped alone to tell thee. Now, when it comes to this fire of God, understand, this is the servant telling him. And so it's not saying, that God actually sent fire from heaven and consumed all the sheep. It's saying that that's what the servant reported. Okay? And I can't help but to wonder if this isn't the devil himself trying to create variance between Job and God. Because, see, the sheep, they would have been used for the sacrifices. I mean, that's what those sheep were used for. We see Job using those exact same sheep for the sacrifices, and Job was daily in the sacrifices, and he was making those offerings, a burnt offering. And while he's making those burnt offerings, how else could he interpret this? Other than God immediately, okay, in his imagination, God immediately coming and consuming all the sheep, he'd be thinking instantly it wasn't enough. Wouldn't he? I mean, the daily sacrifice, that one apparently wasn't enough this morning. Over the course of his days, apparently everything all at once consumed. And so the devil, okay, I believe he's the prince and power of the air, I believe the devil was trying to make Job question God. I think that's what he was trying to do. Just as, the devil was trying to make God question Job. Now, God didn't fall for it. And what we're going to find is Job didn't fall it either, but I think Satan was trying to manipulate Job to think that his very religion was in vain. The faith that he walked in day by day was all for naught. It was empty, it was vain, it didn't matter, it didn't lead anywhere. God just took it all in a moment. It wasn't enough, he wasn't satisfied. And oftentimes I think when we get discouraged, that's what we look at our walk with God. It's just not enough. Now, we ought to be growing in our walk with God, but we start thinking our religion's in vain. Why am I doing this? Why am I going through? I'm in church on Sundays, I'm serving in ministries, I'm doing all these different things, and yet everything just got consumed and it's gone. What have I been doing it for? And we're going to really find that Job is going to be asking that question a lot. What have I done this for? What's the purpose? Why? We continue on. While he was yet speaking, there came also another and said, the Chaldeans made out 3 bands and fell upon the camels and have carried them away. Yea, and slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. Then here comes the Chaldeans. When it rains, it really pours. And so here it is just pouring on Job. He had done what he was supposed to do. He had done right, and yet these Chaldeans came. The Chaldeans, they're the Babylonians. These guys were the very instigators of the Tower of Babel. What God had dispersed them, God had carried them apart. He had said, no, you guys are doing wrong. And so these guys, if I can put it in a word, were evil. And yet Job had done everything right. He had never crossed anybody in any business deals. He had done this the right way. He had started small and he had built it up. God had blessed because he had followed his precepts. And then in a moment, here comes these evil men that had an evil history, an evil past. All they'd ever done is evil, and yet they're the ones enjoying all of his labor. And so Job had to be asking himself this question, and maybe you've asked it before. Why is it I do everything right, and yet I'm having a hard time? And then there are people that are doing evil constantly, and they seem to be, growing and excelling and, really just multiplying and having all this goodness and eating of the fatness, and they're just multiplied exceedingly, even in their evil, yet I do good and I'm suffering. And we wonder that. Why is it that the evil prosper? And they prosper off of me when I'm doing right. Job was asking himself that exact same question, and it would felt so unfair. How can this possibly be? Why are the heathen at ease while I am in suffering? We ask that question when we're having a hard time, don't we? Job was feeling all of these, and then it gets worse. Verse 18 and 19, while he was yet speaking, there came also another and said, thy sons and thy daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And behold, there came a great wind from the wilderness, and smote the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young men, and they are dead. And I only am escaped alone to tell thee. That's the last straw. And what a straw it was. Job loved his kids. Job invested in his kids. He prayed for his kids. He did everything he could for his kids, and I believe that his children represented the most valuable and precious thing in his life. And they were gone, taken away. No warning, no time to say goodbye. What dizzying heartache. I can't even begin to comprehend. I hope I never even touch the feeling of that pain. I believe that, it's the responsibility of children to bury their parents, not vice versa. I don't ever want to bury any of my kids. I can't begin to comprehend that pain. I don't want to begin to comprehend that pain. And yet, Job went through it. Sometimes evil happens that we will never comprehend in this life. We just won't. We wonder, well, what does it mean? It means they died. That's all. It's evil. Things happen in this world that they hurt. And that's just all it's going to do, is it's going to hurt. We ask why. It's a good question. Job chapter 1, verse 20 through 21 says this, then Job arose and rent his mantle and shaved his head and fell down upon the ground and worshipped. Absolutely incredible, his reaction. I don't know, I don't think I'd react that way. But look how Job reacted. He fell and he worshipped and said, naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Job had lost everything. everything he had worked for, all his hopes and dreams, all of his time that he invested it wisely. He invested it in his children, he invested it in his stuff, and everything was growing, it was going, and the future was as bright as it could possibly be, and then suddenly it was like the sun had been snuffed out. Gone. If there was ever a time where someone wondered, how pointless is this? It was right here. As Job sat down, and yet he worshiped. Consider the Lord's servant. Incredible. And even his response, I came in with nothing, I'm going to leave with nothing. What an attitude, what a perspective. Blessed be the name of the Lord. He held on to one thing, God. And so he was able to endure. But we see the devil was not satisfied. Job 1:22 tells us, in all this Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. Now, I want you to consider for a moment all this, everything in Job's life. For all this, he refused to charge God foolishly. Now, I want you to notice something. Oftentimes we can think, hey, why couldn't he charge God? I mean, God is sovereign. God is in control, and yet all of this was taken away from him. Why would it be foolish to charge God? I mean, God is sovereign. He's in control. He allowed it to take place. So why can't we charge God? And the answer is very, very simple. Because we deserve far worse. What we deserve is hell. That's what we deserve. And so anything else in this life is far better than we deserve. God had given Job greatly. Job had gotten to enjoy so much. He got to appreciate so much, and then the hardship came. How hypocritical would it be, as a sinner saved by grace, having been forgiven all sin, for us to be just touched? And again, that's what the Bible says. Reach out the hand, touch him. This is only a touch compared to what it is that we truly deserve. How foolish would it be for us to charge God? Now, God doesn't want us to go through pain, but sometimes that's what we need. God takes no enjoyment in the death of the wicked. God takes no pleasure in it, but God has also told us that life is hard. He proves us. And Job proved God right. So we see the devil, he comes back again. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said unto Satan, From whence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down in it. So again, God asked a question, well, where have you been? Now, God in his omniscience, he knew, of course. He knew what was taking place with Job. But notice how Satan doesn't take any kind of responsibility for what happened. Same exact answer. Oh, just wandering a bit. Like, boy, the guy does not know how to take a loss, does he? Cannot admit failure. The Bible says in Revelation 12:10 that he accuses us day and night. It's terrible, but that's what he's busy doing. And so we see the conversation continue. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? And still he holdeth fast his integrity, although thou movest me against him to destroy him without cause. So God asked the exact same question. Have you considered Job? Have you seen what Job is doing? God was impressed with Job. God was magnified in Job. God was lifted up with Job. And if the very sum of our life is that we brought God glory, what a life. What an incredible life. Job was still the same. God was able to give the exact same response before and after the blessings were removed. It's exactly the same. And I think Job was solid. He was made of good stuff. The integrity was incredible. Where even though he's going through all the trials and he was bending, he would not snap. Same all the way through. Consistent. Sometimes I wonder, and I don't want to find out. I'm just letting you know, I don't want to find out what I'm made out of. But I wonder sometimes. God knows. That's all who I need to know. I want him to know. I don't want you to know. I don't want the devil to know. I don't want to know. Hey, but I wonder, what am I made out of? How consistent am I? How deep do my convictions really go? I wonder it. Now, God knows, and that's the only person who needs to know, but sometimes I think the stress that comes to me in life, it is really easy for the cracks to start showing. It really is. And that troubles me. That concerns me. When, the different trials start coming in life, how quickly am I to say, oh, what's happening? Why is this happening? Why? How could I lose this? How could I go through this? And the cracks start showing very, very easily. Job, at this point, he's not showing any cracks. But the devil, he's not satisfied. He wants to push it further. And Satan answered the Lord and said, skin for skin. Yea, all that a man hath will he give for his life. Satan doubles down. He says self-preservation. You see, because man is inherently selfish, and he has a point there. We are. And he says, man loves his flesh more than anything else. They love themselves more than anything else. Man, very, very selfish. So I tell you what, you take his skin, you take his flesh, you put him in physical pain. You see, the problem was that you put a hedge around him. So I took everything else away, and he's all the same, but you didn't let me get to the heart of the issue. Skin for skin. Let me get in there. And then I'll show you what he's really made out of. It's often interesting, how selfish we are. We really are. We think, no, I'm not selfish. No, we are. Men are lovers of their own selves. That's the reality of it. And, the proof is easy. We're fine watching other people suffer. Sometimes we really, really are. We're reading through the news articles and we go, oh, that's a shame. Then we move right on. Just fine. But when suddenly that same affliction hits us, why doesn't anybody care? Now it's personal. Whoa. Why isn't anyone praying for me in my affliction? And yet, we go through the prayer list and we read through and like, oh, that's too bad. Oh, that's awful. Lord, please help them. But suddenly when it's our affliction, boy, we get spiritual again, don't we? We wonder, why don't people care? Why aren't people invested? Why aren't people coming up and caring for me and loving on me and, taking care and just being tender and, anointing my wounds with salve? And yet, for the past however long, we didn't do that for anybody else, but we're wondering, where is the brethren? And so the devil, he's picking on that. He says, that's where it's at. Make it personal. Because Job is inherently selfish. They're faceless names until it hits us, until suddenly it's our name. Job chapter 2, verses 5 through 6, but put forth thine hand now, and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, behold, he's in thine hand, but save his life. Again, okay, you can prove him. I know what he's made out of. You can prove him. But there are bounds placed again. Save his life. This, you can't touch. You can't kill him. You see, I have plans for Job. And there's nothing you can do that are going to take away from those plans. And so we're going to go ahead and save that. So touch the tender parts of him until he is encompassed with pain, and there is nothing left to kind of improve his condition. There's nothing left to, no hope. He's going to be in constant pain. And it's incredible, when we really start getting hit with the physical pain, how quickly the rest of the blessings in life kind of disappear. 2 days ago, I was out fishing in the river. Beautiful day. Not a cloud in the sky. It wasn't too hot. The wind was blowing just perfectly, so it wasn't interfering with the fishing. The fish were biting, but the mosquitoes weren't. It was gorgeous. And the air was nice and warm, but the water was nice and cool. And so we're wading in that river, and it is just beautiful. And we're fishing, got a full stringer of fish behind, and everything is great. Up until I got a pebble in my shoe. And it's incredible, isn't it? Everything else can be so good. It can be so wonderful. The blessings are just manifold all around us. But then I had a rock in my shoe. And guess where my mind went? To the rock in my shoe. That's right. To the pebble in my tootsies. That's exactly where it went. And suddenly my joy was just snapped away. Even though everything else was so good, all of nature was resounding and singing and wonderful, and I was at rest and at peace and having fun, but my toe hurt. And so that's where I was. We love our flesh. We really, really do. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot unto his crown. And he took a potsherd to scrape himself withal, and he sat down among the ashes. Boils. Nasty boils covered every last inch of his body from the bottom to the top. And these weren't just any kind of boils. These were open sores, apparently seeping and oozing, and they were itchy. And they were everywhere. He couldn't even lay down. His primary source of comfort was a piece of garbage. Something that I just find absolutely just heartbreaking. Something that I find just sad. All the people that he administered to in his life. And we see he administered to people. All the people that he had served. His servants, his wife. Who was anointing him? Who was putting some salve on of his wounds? After all that he has done, he falls down and he is hurting bad. and there is nobody there to anoint him with oil, to put some healing salve, to wrap him in a bandage. And so this guy was lonely. And not only that, not only was he in pain, but again, he'd be hideous to look upon. Those open sores, those wounds, you'd look at him and say, whoa, all right, Job, it looks a little infectious. I'm just going to stay over here and you deal with that. And oftentimes when someone's really struggling, we do the exact same thing. Whoa, you're going through a lot there, cowboy. Okay, I'm just going to be over this way. Job felt lonely, where his piece of comfort, after all that he has, was garbage. Literal garbage. A potsherd. A piece of broken glass, and he's sitting there scraping his wounds. What I find interesting is that he sat among the ashes. Why didn't he go back home? His house wasn't destroyed as far as we can tell. Why didn't he go and lay down in his own bed? Why didn't he wrap himself in maybe his silken sheets and just, comfort himself in that way? I think inwardly he was just done. And so he sat among the ashes. He found company there because, you want to find something that felt useless? Ashes. What are you going to do with ashes? Absolutely purposeless are ashes. Everything has been spent, you're burnt out, you're done, and so that's where Job found his company. He was just done. It's frustrating, isn't it? And sometimes I find myself, I don't want to sit in my bed, I want to sit among the ashes. I'm done. I'm burnt. I'm spent. I feel like I got nowhere else to go. Job chapter 2, verses 9 through 10 says this, Then said his wife unto him, Dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die. Now notice this. The very first thing his wife brings up is his integrity. Okay, you proved your point. Okay, let it go, curse God and die. Now, this is his wife. Okay, this would have hurt. This is his closest companion in life, the one that he has built his life with, the only companion he really has left. And he hears this. Hey, notice his response. But he said unto her, Thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. Now, Job is very, very wise. He didn't say, hey, you're a fool. No. He said, you speak as one of the foolish women. You're not a fool yourself, okay? But, what you're saying, I'm like, man, that's incredible wisdom, Job. In the middle of a bad situation, that's incredible control of the tongue. Just impressive. Anyway, but he continues on, Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this did not Job sin with his lips. Now, I don't want to pile on Job's wife. She had lost everything too. Hey, the situation was completely overwhelming. Okay? And I have, gone there with a lot less on my plate than she ever did. Now, we're running out of time, and we're only halfway through this slide deck. Maybe we'll finish off some other time, but I want to finish with this passage. Job chapter 27, verses 3 through 5 says this, All the while my breath is in me, and the Spirit of God is in my nostrils. My lips shall not speak wickedness, nor my tongue utter deceit. God forbid that I should justify you. Till I die, I will not remove mine integrity from me. Now, Job was speaking this to his friends that were condemning him. But they weren't really very good friends, let's be honest. But really the devil was attacking in the exact same way, wasn't he? He says, God forbid that I should justify you. I'm not going to justify you, Satan. I'm going to hold fast my integrity. Though he slay me, while my breath is in me, as long as I am breathing, I'm not letting go. I'm going to hold fast to God because God is sovereign. He knows what he's doing. I trust him. Now, I have to skip ahead a little bit, and there's some good stuff for passing over, but Job refused to let go of God. He didn't need to know the plan, he needed to know the person. He didn't need to know why, he needed to know who. God is sovereign. If God allowed it into your life, trust him. And you don't need to understand why. I'm just letting you know, you don't need to understand why. And so often we spin our tails trying to understand why. Why is this happening? Why is this taking place? You don't need to know why, you need to know who. God is in control. He is always in control. He has never lost control. And even if we feel like we're out of control, that doesn't mean that God is. And oftentimes that's what we do. We look at what's going on in our life, we feel out of control, and then we assign that to God, and that's foolishness. God knows what he's doing. Trust him.